believed Sonic was dead. He went off on his own and, well, just been kind of portrayed as a coward.
He turned, which is very bad. You don't pull out your gadgets and start like, come on, Tails. So guys, a while ago, we attempted to read through Archie comics, you know what I'm saying? Shout out everybody that actually, you know what I'm saying, came to those weekly things, but I couldn't do it anymore. One, I got tired of reading. Two, the big thing, it was Ken Pender's bitch ass. I couldn't take it anymore. If I had to see that goddamn skunk one more time, and Sally bitch ass, nah. At least Sally written by Ken Penders, definitely 1000% no. But recently, I did say, if we can find some creators that are actually like, you know what I'm saying, summarizing some of the comic stuff, we would tap in and see what they got cooking. Now, I didn't find one with Archie comics, like one that had like a decent amount of them done, but the Game Apologist actually has a decent amount of the IDW comics summarized on his channel. So, today, we're gonna start, potentially, a nice journey into IDW. Sonic Forces fixed? Let's see how this goes, man.
Welcome back to Sonic Speed Reading, where we're gonna break down everything Sonic comic related. Again, still don't have a cute catchphrase for this one, so
Sonic Speed Reading is actually a very good one.
So if you're familiar with my channel, you might be aware that I'm not the biggest fan of Sonic Forces. Despite what it was supposed to be,
as we be, right?
As I did enjoy
it happens.
That game. Overall, I felt it was underwhelming. And a lot of folks, like me, feel like there was a lot of missed potential here. So when I heard that the IDW book was gonna take place right after Sonic Forces, I wasn't too excited.
So it is right after. Nice, you know. I would personally, if they could have just like redid the whole thing, that would have been kind of nice. Written by Ian Flynn and everything like that. Actually make it good, that'd be cool. But it's starting right after. Let them cook, right?
When I heard that the IDW book was going to take place right after Sonic Forces, I wasn't too excited. But I should have trusted Ian Flynn and the crew from Archie, since they were brought back on board to do this book, because Ian does what he's done from the beginning from the Archie stuff, which is basically cleaning up shop. I know it's going to rile up some Archie fans, but it is what it is. Not everything from those books were perfect, and not everything from Sonic Forces was perfect either. And to tell the story he needed to tell, he needed to get back to basics with some of these characters, as well as have them fill in some roles that might have made sense for them in Sonic Forces, or make up for the lack of characters that the Archie series had built up so well. Thankfully, his experience with the comics, and these characters in particular, and, well, just the franchise overall, plays out on the pages without too much fuss. See, the IDW book has two challenges ahead of it. It needs to take place after a Sonic game that a lot of people felt betrayed a lot of character choices and again just didn't do what it should have set out to do.
Yeah, a lot. Betrayed a lot of characters, holy. And even now, because a lot of people kind of get on Ian Flynn for like, you know, oh, he doesn't really also get these characters. I feel like for the most part, the Sega mandates, they kind of like get in the way of what he really wants to do, especially with Shadow. There's always like, and we'll probably get to him in a future video, but the infamous cowards run, I win type shit is disgusting. Oh, I hate that. I hate it. There's some other more like infamous like stuff like I've seen on Twitter where people talk about or argue about this, that, and the third with like Sonic's character, like certain panels or whatever. Again, we'll get into that in a future video, but I think Ian Flynn is pretty solid from what I've seen so far.
The two major arcs in the book right now address a couple of different ways that Robotnik taking over the world could have worked, and throughout the entire thing it covers up some specific plot holes from the game. And these are done to different levels of success. Some are a little more on the nose than I would have liked, and others balloon out into their own story arcs that turns out to be pretty awesome. But to break down the thematic elements that Ian Flynn reuses and takes advantage of that was set up in Sonic Forces, we'd have to break down the story arcs themselves, and we're not going to do that today. Like I said, we're only going to focus on Sonic and the other three main characters.
So no major arcs right now, just kind of seeing how Ian Flynn kind of you know what I'm saying, cleans up the mess from Sonic Forces.
For Sonic himself, there's a bit more personality that shines in this book than it did through Sonic Forces. You can still see some of the Sega mandates coming out to play here. Sonic's no longer allowed to cry or be in relationships, or really a lot of these standout, more humanizing elements that earlier days of Sonic allowed him to be.
Dang, the nigga can't cry? Damn, what was the other one he said? What, relationships? That's valid. I agree. It ain't like can't shed a tear. Like a tear can't fall from his Like, dang.
And that is a massive restriction when you're trying to tell a narrative. He is a corporate mascot, and that corporation is so very scared of showing any sign of weakness.
I feel like with the video games,
even when, you know,
it's like, yeah, like not showing like too much emotion, whatever. But yeah, you're doing like comic book stuff and storylines. It's like, dang, like you can't cry, like, dang, like you can't show like emotion, like he has to just be Sonic the Hedgehog all the time. That's kind of lame, right? Like, that's kind of lame.
So very scared of showing any sign of weakness with this guy. Even when, you know, they should probably focus more on gameplay and narrative, but, you know, that's here or there. Still, with the wiggle room he's allowed, Ian does make
all
the
these
best
mandates,
use of the
y'all don't got no
he's
mandates
sassy,
to make sure
he's
y'all games are
free-spirited,
good.
very confident,
Talking
and
about around that time.
kind-hearted to a fault. And I do mean to a fault. There were moments in this book I felt like Sonic was being a little bit too nice, especially to, you know, robots. But as it turns out, that would play into a bigger conflict in later issues.
Nice!
These are things that do get addressed and other characters call out about Sonic. Sega wants him to be the perfect little blue boy, but that doesn't mean the other characters around him can't criticize him for it. It's actually pretty compelling. And the book has to become a classic superhero narrative. How to remain optimistic, how to...
This reminds me of when we was watching that panel, the Anime Expo panel, and when they asked Kishimoto like how they would describe or the difference between Sonic and Shadow, and they described him like he was like Superman or something. Is that what the Sega mandates are? Like, they need this little blue head rat to be a fucking Superman type? Jesus Christ.
It's pretty compelling. And the book has to become a classic superhero narrative. How to remain optimistic, how to do the...
Superheroes?
These are things that do get addressed and other characters call out about Sonic. Sega wants him to be the perfect little blue boy, but that doesn't mean the other characters around him can't criticize him for it. It's actually pretty compelling. And the book has to become a classic superhero narrative. How to remain optimistic, how to do the right thing in the face of overwhelming, bleak odds. Like in any superhero book, it's always going to go the way of the hero. Like, even death, they're going to come back and be just fine. But you have to at least give the illusion that things aren't going to go their way. And how they triumph, how they overcome, is what makes them so inspiring. And that's what they do with Sonic. So in terms of improvement from Sonic Forces, the character himself doesn't change a whole lot. He's just a little bit wittier, a little bit sassier, but is also allowed to feel a bit of concern and stress every now and then, which he certainly didn't do in Sonic Forces. And far more interesting is how Ian reestablishes the core character of the other characters. In the first issue, Sonic meets up with Tails, and like I said in that first episode discussing where you should start with Sonic comics, he quickly establishes how well these two characters work together. There's no convoluted backstory, you know who Tails is, you know who Sonic is, and that should be that. But Tails did go off the deep end in Sonic Forces. Once he believed Sonic was dead, he went off on his own and, well, it's just been kind of portrayed as a coward.
He turned pussy, which is very bad. And he's showing a clip from my favorite Sonic game. Yes, indeed. But yeah, Tails was a pussy here too, man. You don't pull out your gadgets and start all these freaking Dark Gaia goons. Get your dummy reed bombs and start chucking them at these niggas. And you don't start tail spinning like come on, Tails!
I should also note that Tails has been kind of a wimp since Sonic Unleashed, so this is not too out of character for the most modern interpretation of Tails, but that's the most offense I'm going to give this. They just redesigned his personality to help fit the narrative they were trying to tell, and it wasn't a very good narrative. And that's certainly not a character you want to follow along in a comic book, so Flynn quickly reestablishes the Tails we know and love. Idolizes Sonic, treats him like a best friend and big brother, and a genius. Perfectly capable and competent all on his own, because he learned all of these lessons from Sonic, and he's carried that forward into his own life. Regardless, they still have to address how he was acting in Sonic Forces, and instead of just shying away from it and never bringing it up, Ian deals with it head on. In the first issue, we see Tails trail off from a thought once he realizes that Sonic is going to go off on his own and the potential of him actually dying could be a thing. That's not something he wants to relive. But he quickly realizes that, he's got to do what he's got to do. And Tails has to think tactically here. He's going to be far more reliable to these folks.
Gotta do what he gotta do. I like that.
Sonic's going to be much more effective if he takes advantage of that speed and gets from place to place helping people out. There are times when their team up is far more effective, but right now we see Tails understanding that he needs to grow up, he needs to step up, and he needs to be his own hero. And at the same time, he's also addressing that, I didn't handle that death stuff too well at all, but, I was a little bit out of it, I goofed up, I'm gonna do better. And they address all that within a couple of lines. Going forward again...
All right. So, IDW is supposed to be, canon, right? This is like the same shit that he does in Frontiers. So, he talks to Sonic here, right? If I'm understanding this right. And they go over the whole, you going away, I didn't really handle that well, I gotta be better, this, that, and the third. So now this makes the whole Frontiers thing even worse because like when I was, going through Frontiers, it was cool that he was like, okay, yeah, like, what I'm saying, like that they mentioned it, right? Although it was just kind of weird, right? Like you didn't have to do that, like just make Tails who he should be. You don't have to remind me how he was in past games or whatever. Just make him the character that he should be. Now it's kind of redundant. It happened here in the canon timeline because it's canon. Everything's canon. It didn't happen again in Frontiers? That's nasty. That's nasty work. No.
A little bit out of it, I goofed up, I'm gonna do better. And they address all that within a couple of lines. Going forward, again, you're gonna see Tails in some very dark and desperate situations, and unlike Sonic, you can see that Sega has eased up a little bit on what Tails is allowed to do. And through him and other characters outside of Sonic, you do see him lose hope, you do see him cry, but you still see him overcome and be the hero we know he is. The central focus of the book is not on Tails,
I like to
but
hear.
at the
I like to
same
hear
time,
that
they
Ian
take
Flynn
a
has
great
heard.
deal of effort to re-establish the hero we know and love. And if nothing else, I feel like that's commendable. Now, the next character, though, well, that has some fans a little bit heated up. Certainly not the most riled up compared to another character, but that's gonna need its own episode. I'm talking about...
Yes, it will. Yes, it will.
Of course.
Okay, hold on.
In the second issue of the book, Sonic has sped from where Tails is hanging out to new spot where a super crab robot is about to mess up a town, and he meets up with Amy. In her first appearance, they quickly establish that, yes, she is still all googly-eyed for Sonic the Hedgehog, and is terrifyingly effective with a hammer.
I like
that. On top
that.
of this, she desperately tries to get Sonic to rejoin the Resistance, and Sonic's not having it at all.
He
From
said,
there,
nah,
the
I'm
town
good.
they're in is attacked by more robots, and Sonic goes off and does his thing, but Amy, on top of fighting robots, also helps direct and command the civilians to bring up the most effective defenses and how to protect themselves. They're basically setting her up to be the new commander of the Resistance from Sonic Forces. And this is where a lot of folks have some problems with this portrayal of Amy.
Sonic can't cry. Am I the only one that thinks that's a little vague? Yeah. Sega was like, damn, like, remember that character from Sonic 06? Yeah. The one that literally couldn't cry for like 10 years. Yeah, we was cooking with that. Let's do that with Sonic. Back to the whole Amy thing though. I think her being like interested in Sonic is a huge part of her character and is a great thing that is still a thing here. I like that. The only thing that people don't really like about it, I feel like, is that they make it seem like she's a stalker. No, just don't make her seem like she's a stalker. And what's wrong with it? What's wrong with her liking Sonic, right? Like, cool. I didn't place her character pretty well. There's no be like, there's no way out of marry me. Like, we're children. What are you talking about, right?
And if you've only ever played Sonic games, you might not see what the big deal is. But for fans that grew up with the cartoons and the long-running comic, this is the very clear and obvious role of Sally Acorn. This is, again, another character that deserves her own episode. There's a lot to talk about, and she is so extremely important to the overall franchise of Sonic, despite what Sega nowadays wants you to think. And a lot of fans are torn between loving Sally or loving Amy, because we're in arguments on which one Sonic should, And while that is an interesting discussion, and I certainly have my own stance on it, it's not entirely fair to either character. But relationship stuff aside, a lot of Sally fans are still upset because, well, Sally was made for this. Why on earth is Amy taking up this role? Amy's her own character. She doesn't need to be Sally on top of it. Well, the unfortunate truth about this whole matter is, Sally doesn't exist in this world. The games have never featured the Freedom Fighters outside of
Sally's not a character that we should even think about. So yeah, Amy takes that role.
Sonic Spinball in a brief cameo. And as the years have progressed and the franchise has become more cohesive, the mistreatment of Sally and the other Freedom Fighters is something we need to address, and I certainly miss those characters as well. But as it is, we don't have them anymore. And for me, in terms of Sonic Forces, that game and the developers and the writers just kind of filled roles for a lot of the Sonic cast that was already there without really understanding their personality, their power set, or building on a lot of character development that the game really needed. And in terms of the role of Commander, that was left to Knuckles, who I will get to in a minute. But I personally felt that while he would be capable to command a small ragtag group of folks against Eggman and his army, he's not the best choice for that particular position. It does make more sense for Amy to be on the more delegation end of things. Knuckles is a fighter, a little thick-headed at times, but a fighter. And the best use for him would be out in the front lines fighting these robots, not hidden in a bunker. And without Sally, well, there are still some differences between how Sally would have commanded the Resistance and how Amy's commanding the Resistance. And I think they navigate these troubled waters fairly well. Not perfectly, but well. The difference between Amy and Sally is Amy kind of grew into this position, and Sally's just always been a natural leader. Amy started off with her entire identity surrounded by crushing on Sonic, and it's only been very recently in the last few years where she's been a little more subtle about it, but at the same time, Ian addresses that, yeah, all that other stuff with her obsessing over Sonic did happen, and hints of it still leak out of her. I probably could have phrased that a little bit better. Sally, on the other hand, especially in the earlier days, regardless of how she feels about Sonic, that does not come before duty. And she's not
I remember
with any of
we
his
was
nonsense.
reading this live. I remember this dumb shit. This shit pissed me off. I was like, man, I hate all of y'all. Y'all stink. Look at my guy. He's like, man, Sally.
She knows how to best utilize Sonic and point him in the right direction to get the job done. The IDW Amy doesn't feel like a clone
Sailor
of Sally.
Moon, what the fuck?
She feels like someone who mentored under Sally. That's how I've always interpreted it. While Sally does not exist in this story, Ian does have quite the history with those other characters. There's a lot of genuine love and care put into the Freedom Fighters while he was on the Archie book. And to me, I always saw this as a subtle homage to Sally, as opposed to just taking the other girl and having her fill the role that the missing girl once occupied. If you don't feel that way, I completely understand. But again, we are dealing with a world that is not allowed to have Sally, but a scenario and theme that could very much use Sally. And while both of these characters are directing their troops, Amy is growing into it.
I wonder how long they ride this like resistance thing that they got going on here. Like, is that just
boots for crying out loud?
Like,
Sally started off in combat
is
boots,
that just
then
always
added
a thing?
vest
Like,
a couple years into her run. Now, I know this particular video has turned into a Sally versus Amy conversation, but I feel like it's important to emphasize this particular point because it is one of contention. It is one that is talked about a great deal, and it is one that keeps people from fully enjoying the narrative on display here. And I don't really feel like that's fair. Like I said, while both of these characters are basically in the same role, their personalities still dictate some particular scenarios. When you really think about it, it does not make a lot of sense for Sonic to stay put in one place for too long. It doesn't make sense for him to be hiding. And that's basically what he was doing on the American side of things in terms of the cartoon and comic for many, many years. And I could see an argument where someone like Sally, as a commander, could convince Sonic to help and stay put and be a part of the team. But here, when Amy's basically asking Sonic to do the same thing, he's not about it. Not at all. They bicker and argue about it, and by the end of it, Amy accepts that this is who Sonic is. And I don't know if Sally would have caved as easily, or would have even presented that question in the same fashion. Ultimately, it doesn't really matter, because again, Sally's not here. I just wanted to say that in terms of this narrative, I understand why Amy's taking up Sally's role, but I also appreciate that Amy is still Amy in this role, if that makes sense. This gives her something more to do, and at the same time, she's still allowed to have feelings for Sonic, and she's still allowed to grow from that loud, obnoxious girl that she used to be. I very clearly have a lot of love for Sally, but I hope you don't misinterpret that as a hatred for Amy Rose. Throughout all of this media, she really feels like one of the few characters that has actually grown, and I certainly like how she is portrayed in this book, and it's certainly a step up from Sonic Forces. I mean, at the end of the book, you still see that Amy adores Sonic, but she has her priorities in order. Sonic offers her to come along with him, and while that sounds like a dream come true to Amy, she understands that her place is here.
Oh, she does. She doesn't accept that. Oh my, wow. She's like, nah, like I got shit to do. You know, I gotta stand on business type shit. I like that.
People, and she's going to do exactly that. So yeah, that one issue got all that rambling nonsense out of me. But we still have one more character to discuss before we wrap it up for the day. So in terms of Knuckles, I would say that out of every other character from the Archie series, he was certainly treated with the most respect and the most growth. While I didn't agree with a lot of the story choice.
When we was reading these shits, like, it was like, yo, like, they were in their bag trying to create, like a whole little, like, plot line for this dude. It was crazy.
Is that Penders had made with the character. There's a lot of really good stuff here that the games never really took advantage of, and stripping all that away from Knuckles feels a little disrespectful. So I understand why some fans are kind of pissed with his more recent portrayals. Still, we have to establish him in the IDW book, and at the same time address his role from Sonic Forces, which I had already mentioned was as the Resistance Commander. Now, if you'd read the Archie books, you could very easily understand how Knuckles went from this isolated, naive loner who got tricked by a fat boy with a big giant orb to a capable and competent leader with a group of folks that put their lives in his hands.
I was fucking with it too.
This isn't Archie Knuckles, and the games have never done a great job showing that particular growth.
Yeah, it doesn't work here though.
Friends as the series went on, but time and again they would just reuse the same stupid Knuckles got tricked by Eggman nonsense.
And Knuckles is always a loner. Like, he's like, at the end of the day, like, yeah, he's cool with Sonic and Tails and you know, Amy and all that stuff, but like, at the end of the day, he's a loner. He's not leading no goddamn resistance. He's not a leader. What are we doing? Why did they do that? That's so weird, man.
And eventually, they even gave up on that and just didn't give him anything to do, honestly. Sonic Forces has no mention of the Master Emerald, it has no mention of the floating island. And look, maybe that wasn't the main focus of the game, but when it comes to taking over the world and sources of power, that's something that should be addressed. And actually, Ian did just that. Around the release of Sonic Forces, there were also some free digital comics that released at the same time. And in these comics, you can see that Ian understands these characters far better than Sonic Team actually does. The digital comic goes out of their way to explain why Knuckles is not on the floating island. And the IDW book also addresses that particular issue, and it actually goes on to becoming the central focus of the first big story arc, which again we will discuss in a separate video. That sounds interesting. Entire personality is wrapped around Angel Island and the Master Emerald, and it feels a little weird that a lot of the games in recent years don't even address this. Thankfully, Ian does. Personally, I don't think it makes a whole lot of sense, but Sonic Forces is going to exist one way or the other, and Ian's got to write
Knuckles and Silver team up? Hold on.
Knuckles here, you see that play out almost immediately. Sonic talks about him being the commander of the Resistance, and Knuckles regrets all the busy work he has to do now that there's no more robots to fight. He doesn't want to do all the inventory and paperwork and delegation that, well, Amy has always done for the group, but Knuckles has never been too interested in himself. Like I said, he's far more effective out there kicking some butt, and I think Ian agrees. So this issue establishes who Knuckles is. And while you could see where there was a friendly rivalry between Knuckles and Sonic, these two have learned to play off their wildly different personalities and power sets. The way these two talk to each other feels like a natural growth for them through the years, and I really appreciate that. I also like that this Knuckles is a little devoid of humor. He takes things very seriously. Like when these two new skunk villains show up and go all Team Rocket and pose all over the place, Sonic's laughing his spikes off, and Knuckles is like, oh man, these guys are highly coordinated. And that's great because it shows Sonic and Knuckles and how these two characters react to the exact same situation, showing you how different these two personalities are. If you've never read anything having to do with Knuckles prior to this,
they are opposites.
Exactly what this character is all about, what he's capable of, and yeah, he can be a little bit dense or a bit too serious for his own good, but he's not an idiot, and he's got a good heart. He just prefers to solve problems by punching it in the face. And after all of this, again, the focus shifts over to the Master Emerald and Angel Island. We'll get to that in due time. But through all of this, you see Knuckles regretting ever leaving the island at all. And you could see this as a regression of his character, but...
Damn it, man. Why did Sega make me leave my island, you dumbass niggas? It's like, god damn it. Contact and grab you mother.
For all three of these characters, I feel like bits and pieces of Sonic Forces betrayed who they are to begin with. And I don't really see that as a regression. I see that as refocusing their priorities. Being the guardian of the Master Emerald and Angel Island is not something you outgrow. That will always be important. That will always be necessary. And being conflicted between defending his island and defending the entire world is an interesting concept to explore. And they actually talk about it in the book. And you see Amy consoling Knuckles about it, which again kind of shows one of her better personalities.
I know, Knuckles. Sega fucked me up too, but we're back, baby.
All three of these characters have to get back to some sense of normalcy, something that we know about these guys, without betraying the story of Sonic Forces. Flynn knows these characters, and I guarantee he understands that Sonic Forces screwed things up quite immensely, and I'm sure he didn't want to be in the position where he has to fix things up before he goes forward. But again, this is something he had to do ever since he was brought on to write Sonic comic books. But having to dance around the fact that he no longer has the Archie characters, he has to work with Sonic Forces stuff, with Sega mandates, and at the same time introduce these guys to folks who might have had no interest in Sonic the Hedgehog, and has to get a grip on their attention and keep them on board. That's a lot of stuff to juggle at once, and I feel like these first few books do a very commendable job. And again, when we talk about the story arcs in general, you are going to see a lot of themes that Sonic Forces could have played with but never bothered to explore. But in the hands of people that care about this franchise, it really shines. That's not to say it's perfect.
Oh god, the infamous
glaring problems to address. God. And there are spots in the narrative that could have been improved, but very rarely do we see these characters and these narratives handled.
Whoa, Sonic Heroes reference. Sonic Heroes reference. Whoa. Oh, whoa. Wait a minute. Oh, I like this. That's pretty goddamn cool.
Do we see these characters and these narratives handled with such care? There's a lot of love and respect for all things Sonic here, and even when Ian Flynn has to go out of his way to reestablish the core personalities of some of these guys, there's still a lot of love and respect to build off of from even embarrassments like Sonic Forces. Like I said at the start, there's a lot of potential storytelling that you can do with that theme. And even if the war is over, there's a lot left to explore, and where I wasn't too excited to begin with, I'm all on board these days. But I've rambled on long enough. There are more things that we could discuss in terms of fixing things from Sonic Forces, but just covering the 4 core characters is plenty enough. We haven't even discussed Eggman. We haven't even discussed the villains. We haven't discussed any of the new characters. There's a lot left to cover in terms of IDW, and that's not even touching Fleetway or Archie. There is a lot to dig into here. But with the hiatus going on, now is a great time to jump into these books. You can get them digitally from Comixology or, I don't know, probably some other means as well. I don't really recommend going out into the world and trying to grab that stuff for yourself, but hopefully the mess of the world will clear up sooner rather than later, and we can get back on track and tell some awesome Sonic stories, because in terms of the comics, they're in the right hands. And I can't wait to see where they go from here, and I can't wait to jump back into Sonic speed reading to discuss even more of this stuff. Thank you for watching. Thank you for participating in the comments. Thank you for sharing on all kinds of social media. Thank you for subscribing. Just thank you for whatever you can do. I appreciate it, and I love making stuff for you guys. Toot toot, Sonic speed readers.
You just say toot toot. That's funny as hell. W fucking video. So far though, in fact, yeah, let me sub, because honestly, I've seen videos from him before. IDW seemed like it had a pretty good start. You didn't go over any major story arcs yet, but based off of like the big 4, you know, Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, and Amy, I mean, it seems like, yeah, like, they're doing these characters justice, you know? I'm still keeping an eye on certain things, like how they do Sonic, because I don't know about portraying him as, like, making this like a superhero comic kind of thing. I don't know about that one. I don't know about that, right? But we'll see how they do it. Maybe they cook, maybe they don't. We'll see that in the future. And in Shadow, I wonder how they do Shadow in this bitch, because that one panel is disgusting, man.